Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today's guest is Shirley Engelmeier, and she's founder and CEO over at InclusionINC. Shirley, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Great to be here. Thank you so much.
All right, so Shirley, we got a lot to talk about today. So we're going to get into deliberate disruption, unraveling the anti-DEI ideology, and getting back to why DEI works. So excited to get into this, and also, of course, your work at Inclusion Inc. And to get us started, though, we'll start this episode the way that we start them all, with what we like to call our Mission Matters Minute. So Shirley, at Mission Matters, our aim and our goal is to amplify stories for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. That's what we do. Shirley, what mission matters to you?
You know, for nearly 25 years, Inclusion Inc. has been helping businesses leverage inclusion as a business strategy. We do that by really helping leaders get it in a practical, business-centric approach. And I think most importantly these days is we help coach them on being able to articulate the business rationale for why they're focusing on inclusion, diversity, and equity.
So great to have you on, and great topic. And one of the things that strikes me about your background, you've been doing this for a couple of decades. So some of these conversations that are newer, or just kind of like, just happen. Like you've been here for a long, I would argue, it's been a while in terms of being a part of that narrative and that discussion. First off, how did you get into that space? Like, how'd you get drawn
in? It's a very interesting story in that I have no background to do this, okay? Like many of us, we get opportunities in life because I was in consumer products right before this. And I grew up in a time in consumer products that they took anybody to train them, including a music major like myself.
Yeah.
And what I realized that I got out of that was really a great set of analytics. What's the business rationale? In the last employer I was at was Frito-Lay. I was super psyched to be there. I didn't realize that position as the only woman out of 26 division sales managers would prepare me for this work.
Wow.
And you might ask why, because when I had the sixth best sales record and they had to collapse divisions, the guy who had the worst sales record, number 26, got the job, and I lost him. And so then I realized what it felt like to be the other, how my difference may have impacted what happened to my career, my livelihood. A couple of years passed, and ultimately, I believe this work chose me. I'm not, in the beginning, I kind of thought, you have no clue what you're doing, Shirley, except I could say, what are you trying to accomplish? And the very first huge project that I landed was as a white woman from, as I say, Minnesota. I landed.
I couldn't tell by that accent. Could not tell.
I'm so positive. I landed the Denny's race relation consent decree. And that's kind of the launch of the whole thing.
Wow. And so, like, looking back in your career, like, when did you know that this was going to be something that you'd be sticking with long term? Like, how did you know that this wasn't just another thing, or just how did you know this was going to really turn into a life mission? Or did you know? Like how'd that come about for you?
I don't know how you make life decisions, but I rely on these kind of nudges around me.
Oh, yeah.
Like, right? So give me
nudges, signs, like things fall into place, like God, the universe, however we want to word that. Like I look for them too all the time. I'm like, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I have this weird feeling always, like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so I used to put it out to the universe. Give me a sign as big as a 40-foot billboard in my front yard.
Oh, I like that.
Isn't that great?
I'm going to adopt that. I'm always looking. I never thought to ask the universe for bigger signs. Go ahead. Literally. Go ahead.
Well, and that's because I thought, am I really supposed to do this? And I started doing this when I was a single parent, and didn't the universe know I needed a fixed salary? And so, and each time I do that, even in the current times we're in, I get the reassurance you're where you're supposed to be. Now, I don't always like that answer, but I came to the point that that's really my personal mission in this is to help organizations understand the business relevance of creating a culture of inclusion. Because that resonates with me and my family and friends and, kind of how I roll in life.
Yeah. And so sticking in the early days a little bit longer, what was it like trying to even just, because I don't, in my recollection, talking about DE and I, like that was very early on. So that wasn't quite like buzzwords or this or that. Like, what was it like in the early days, even just getting traction?
Well, in the very beginning, before I formed Inclusion Inc., I worked for a company that had just started in this. And quite frankly, they're long gone. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They didn't really know. They had one course. And so I would go out, and in that day, it was about diversity and inclusion. It was actually before I formed Inclusion Inc. in 1992 that there was a consent decree against Denny's, and I had to work with the Department of Justice. That was underneath this hair color is a lot of gray hair.
Come on.
From that, because I'd have the Department of Justice saying to me, the people over there are all racist. And I'm saying, wait, they had systems failures. Do I think some racists work there? Sure, there was racists everywhere. But they had a leveraged buyout, and they stopped focusing on core training at the restaurant level. And so, yes, those early days, I kept coming back to what are they, the Department of Justice in this dissent decree, and Denny's, and I use quotes for those who are just listening, in cooperation with a consent decree? How is it that we're going to help them meet their outcome? And we created this very broad-based training program that was focused largely on how to create a culture where everybody felt welcomed, but it was through specific processes. Like, it sounds so crazy because it's so simple. Hey, who's next? Are you on the list yet to be seated? Because there were things that were happening by bias where white people were being seated first and they were being talked to first. So it really helped me understand that there are systems or processes that happen even at everyday interaction that exclude people.
I want to jump around a little bit here. Let's get further into your book. So for all my audience that have been listening to this show for a long time, they know that I love authors. I love bringing authors on. I love talking about books, and I love helping them promote it because I know how hard it is to really put your thoughts together in a full, complete work like a book. It's just hard. It's not easy. It's a long endeavor. It's a long project, but I think it's worthwhile for anyone that wants to get a message or story out there. Like, I'm a big fan of publishing. So that being said, first thing first, Shirley, like what was the inspiration for this? Like, what was the inspiration for this undertaking? Because it's never easy.
Okay, so this is the fourth book that I've written. The first three were more, how would I say it? Oh, look, inclusion, still the competitive business advantage. All the books that I've done, or Inclusive Leader, how to navigate the 21st century global workforce. It was to keep in a really concise way so a leader could literally go through, I'm not kidding when I say this, look at bullets, look at charts, and at the end of it go, oh, yeah, this actually makes sense to me for business.
Yeah.
I wasn't planning to write a book this year.
Hold on. You weren't planning, to just kind of happen? You must have been like really inspired. That's not...
Okay, I was possessed.
There you go. I wasn't going to use the word, but was there a billboard planted in your front? Like, write the book? What happened?
Yeah. Okay, so here's what happened. I'm going to give you a little retrospective to kind of frame this up. And we can come back and go as ever deep as you want. You know, my whole career until the murder of George Floyd, which as I sit in my desk here and point a finger to my right, it's like 5 miles there over there, was to convince people about the business-centric nature of this work. Okay, so that big global awakening happened, George Floyd, COVID, all of that, and something happened. Bam. DE&I comes on the scene. I love inclusion, diversity, and equity. Note, I say it differently, and I come back to why. However, you had leaders who are already mixed up about the difference between inclusion and diversity and why it mattered for their business. And now we have an acronym that's completely intimidated them. So I'll come back to any of those however you want. The book came about because here's what happened. I was going, oh my gosh, this is the best work we've ever done. This is so deep. Everybody from electrical companies, construction companies, scientists, engineers, they are now willing to step into it. And a couple things happened before January of this year that made me realize something was going on, but I kept coming back to, oh, organizations finally got it. In January of this year, I realized the depth level of the disinformation campaign that was going on. And I had a little inkling of that from, you remember when in 2022, there were these two kind of seems like they just popped up, like the anti-woke bill in Florida and the don't say gay bill. And I just said, oh yeah, what are they doing down there? But I realized on January 24th of this year, that what they were doing had been implementing something the Claremont Institute, a conservative think tank, had started in 2019. And they said, hey, Adam, here, you want to change your state legislature? Here's all of the work to make it illegal to do this at universities. And each day after that, I'd get up and I go, oh, I have to write a white paper on this. And about a week and a half later, I either say possessed or my hair was on fire, that I say, I have to write a book on this. I have to, from my place in the world, say, this is highly funded. It's strategic. I sound like a conspiracy theorist here. I am not. That it was going on behind the scene. And everybody says, oh, yeah, you're talking about Project 2025. This was happening way before Project 2025 started to happen. And so it was showing up all over. It was showing up, we were not going to fund it in universities, but there never was a clear reason. We're not going to fund it in business. Let's create this whole disinformation campaign. And so that book was the fastest cranked out book probably, well, in my lifetime, I can say, against those other 3 books, because I felt such urgency about having to get this message out.
And so as you were going through that process, like, what was that like to be, because I've never had that, like, being possessed to crank out a book fast. It's never happened to me. Like, I know that's obviously a lot of years went into this and it's your 4th edition, but like, what was that like?
So I think the first thing that it was like was each day I felt like I had to take an energy shower from the toxic disinformation that was out.
Oh man. So first you needed a bath after that.
I know.
I wasn't expecting that answer, Shirley. I'm not gonna lie.
I would call my closest friends and colleagues and go, you can't believe what I learned today. You know, it was like a whack-a-mole. One more thing, one more thing, right?
Yeah.
And then I thought,
you were driving them crazy, I'm sure.
I'm sure, as I was driving myself crazy, but
I know.
I felt like, it had to be written.
Yeah.
And the thing that I have a business coach of like
Mhm.
13 years. He said, wait a minute. Why are you starting with the disinformation?
Mm.
You start with why creating a culture of inclusion is
Mhm.
going to drive innovation by
Mm.
20%. You start with the fact that it's going to help them sell more goods and services. He knew
Mhm.
my whole deal. He
Yeah.
knew that you're not going to ask me, a baby boomer in Minnesota, to sell to Gen Z, or
Mhm.
when I was at Frito-Lay to sell chips to Latinx. I don't know that. And so he
Mm.
goes, keep positioning this as why it works, and then lift up the information, quote, disinformation that
Mhm.
made this come about. And
Mm.
that helped me frame because I kept saying, I got to tell people everything. No,
Yeah.
you don't. You have to let them know, remind them this is
Mhm.
why it's here. And the other thing is, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's critical. There's a huge difference between inclusion, diversity, and equity.
Mhm.
And this frame of DE&I has done us no service.
Mm.
So when that happened and whoever created it, it just flew across the globe. Inclusion is, how are you going to hear people's voices to drive business success?
Mhm.
How are
Mhm.
you going to ask the person who's doing the job? And white men, this
Mhm.
is no ding on white men. I'm married to one and have two sons that are. I want
Yeah.
them to be highly successful. They too understand what it feels like to be excluded from the process.
Mhm.
That's different than, oh, I want to expand my business. I
Mhm.
may need to have more diverse representation here,
Yeah.
and it's going to help me sell more Coors beer, as I
Yeah.
was speaking about before. It's going to help me attract more clients.
Yeah.
So the punchline is, if you create a culture of inclusion, hey, and with the D, if we know we have bias, and
Mhm.
I say if we breathe, we have bias. So, okay,
Yes.
good, no shame. Then
Yep.
that will result in equity.
Mm.
That became a huge piece of the work we did with leaders and executives since George
Mm.
Floyd, to say, I don't have academic discussion about equity. I
Yeah.
can assure you, if you do these two things, people will also feel like they belong,
Mm.
and you will have equity in the results. So that had to come through loudly and clearly too, about
Mm.
how they're differentiating. Don't glob them all together because it's not
Mhm.
helpful.
So Shirley, obviously you spent some time on this book. It's in depth. It's a culmination, and it's a fourth of your books. What do you hope that the readers walk away with after digesting this, after going through the content? What do you hope they walk away with?
I want people to twofold. I'm providing them the rationale, the language for why this could matter for their business. They still have to
Mm.
internalize that, right? And say, our specific business case.
Yeah.
I'm also inviting people to have the courage to say what the business case is.
Mm.
A thing that's been coming to me lately as I've been watching, I think there have been 6 companies that have, like, in a nanosecond dropped their program.
Mhm.
And we can talk about that later, but I keep saying, why are you cowering to disinformation?
Mm.
Why aren't you using the same brilliance that you have to market your products to tell everybody, both internally and externally, that
Yeah.
this works? And
Yeah.
the other part of the book, of course, is, we have all these realignment in, inclusion programs that are both for
Mhm.
execs, leaders, for the masses, through e-learning, so that people can remember, oh, yeah,
Mhm.
that's why we're doing this.
Yeah. So Shirley, one of the things that you also talk about are the core inclusion behaviors. Could you maybe, because one of the big things you're known for as well is like the business case for all of what we're talking about, not just the it's right to do it type thing, but the business case. So talk a little bit about those behaviors.
Sure. So the behaviors, how that came about that we globally validated those is this, Adam. We realized that for about, I don't know, through 2012, we validated inclusion behaviors, but they were US centric.
Mm-hmm.
And since 2012, we continually validate these. So what I'm telling you is still holding up. I think that's because we're all humans and we like to be included in things.
Yes.
And so we said, look, what are the top behaviors that make you feel included? When we partnered with SMU's Executive Education Department, Miguel Canones, we also said, is it culturally normative? So I want to just share like a highlight on that. When I think about China, for example, I think about hierarchy. Even in China, individual contributors across the whole spectrum wanted to hear their voice heard, even if it wasn't culturally normative. And so here are these these super simple behaviors. The two most important ones are ask me what I think, implied, I'm the one that does the job. And it doesn't mean you have to ask me all the time. And it doesn't mean I have input on what the CEO does from my place. And the second one that I think is as or more important is providing rationale for why decisions are made. Think about how decentralized we all were during COVID. If people may not like what they hear, but if they can be given the rationale. Now, here's the punchline on these. Can you imagine something that costs $0 and all you're doing is changing how you interface? It's going to drive your engagement 20%.
Yeah.
It's going to make, these are the findings, the return on investment of that work. People are going to be 4 times more likely to stay. Their engagement's going to double to 25% and 10% more productive. Like, where else can you get that kind of return, right?
Right. So Shirley, the book is out. The book is out. It's doing well. You have your, I should say, the multiple books out, but the book is out. And what's next? I mean, what's next for you? What's next for your company? Like, what's next?
So, seriously, all seriousness, and my praise of what you're doing here, Adam, in Mission Matters. I think that people being able to hear my voice directly address this, and the really, like, I mean, I make some corny jokes, I know, but the no nonsense.
Hey, I like corny. A lot of people like corn. I'm in for corn. Walt Disney was called corny once upon a time too. Just FYI, I read a lot of his biographies and things. He said millions of people like corn. Go ahead.
Yeah, there you go. So, but my no nonsense business approach to this, I want people to hear that as well as read it. We're starting our very first live event to a group of invited business leaders here on October 8th, and those will continue. And there are a lot of beyond the book tour kinds of things, but press releases that are going out addressing the specific issues that we see that continue to happen day in and day out.
It's great. Shirley, if somebody's listening or watching this and they want to follow up, they want to pick up a copy of the book, they want to learn more about Inclusion Inc., how do they do that?
So if you want to get a copy of the book, right now we're doing it as an ebook on Amazon. Super simple to find. Deliberate Disruption, my name. If you want to get a hold of us, you can go to www.inclusioninc.com or stop.anti-DEI.com.
Awesome. And for everybody listening or watching this, just so you know, we'll put the links to that in the show notes. So you can just click on the links and head right on over. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Each and every day, we're bringing you new content, new ideas, new thought leaders, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way in your journey as well. And we don't want you to miss a thing. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Shirley, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. And I wish you much more continued success with the book and the book tour.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be with you.